This happened to a friend of mine that happened sometime in 2011 or 2012. It was on the last day of school before exams were going on. So this happened to a student named Sarah. Now, to keep in mind, this isn't really the type of story to make you jump out of your seat or anything, but it's definitely one that raised really much concerns at that time. Now, the student at the time of the story, I'll call her by the name Sarah. Sarah apparently had a lot of issues, and she even cried a lot. Funny enough, my friends and I used to make fun of her at the time because of the time she used to cry quite a lot, and you could say she was definitely a woman child in perspective, but that just wasn't all. At the time, though, this was one of the times where she ran out of the classroom screaming and crying. She cried a lot, and it wasn't the first rodeo we've had with her, but this was definitely one of the moments that really scared a lot of teachers and EAs. Now, to cut to the chase, Sarah apparently was on the computer working on something when she all of a sudden ends up getting told what not to do. I don't remember what it was, but she was told what she couldn't do. And since she couldn't have her way, she ended up crying and runs out of the classroom. This got the authority of the teacher who sent down an EA to go and look for Sarah. However, it was eventually 5 minutes later and Sarah hadn't returned. 5 minutes turned into 10, eventually into 15, and eventually into 20 minutes. Since she hadn't come back, it felt like as if she had escaped. Now, of course, the teacher ended up making a phone call to the office saying that Sarah hasn't returned and that they were concerned if something happened. They thought that Sarah might have gotten lost trying to find the classroom or something, but it wasn't until a few minutes later when they got back. Apparently, it was only a few minutes later when a police officer arrived at the classroom. Apparently, Sarah eventually ran out of school property and went down at least a few streets until a police officer had found her. She eventually wasn't arrested or anything, but she was brought back to the school, and of course, Sarah got suspended for running out of school property without authorization from anybody. I don't know why she ran out of school property like that, but I kind of wonder why was she even thinking of doing that? It always still bugs my mind to this day, but of course a friend of mine told me about it because he eventually knew about what happened since some of his friends had told him and explained to him what happened. I honestly don't know what Sarah's intentions were, but whatever they were, someone could have kidnapped her that day and she wouldn't even know it, but it's definitely something that really sticks to a lot of students, and the teacher even was frightened for her safety. So at this time, Sarah had never done anything like that again in school, and since it was the last day of school, she wasn't really suspended, but she was suspended for the rest of the day and wouldn't come back to the following year. That's what I mean by suspended, even though it took place on the last day of school before exams. It still makes me wonder why Sarah did that, like why she ran out like that. But that's an answer we're never going to get. I don't even know why she ran out like that, but apparently it's just was a mystery of our own selves. This happened to a student named Eric at the time of the story. Eric was in junior year of high school. This was around the last day of school before exams were taking place. Since he only had one exam, which being period 5, he didn't have any exams till the period 5 exam, which was on a few days ago. Well, a few days after the last day of school. Now, Eric was a pretty young student, and he eventually liked going on field trips and stuff. He even enjoyed being on multiple teams. One of the days while he was in his class, they were pretty much going over what was going to be happening and what was going to be on the exams. for those who had to take exams. Since he was exempted from 4 exam classes, he decided to ask the teacher if he could go and use the bathroom. And of course, the teacher said yes, and he got the hall pass. Eric ended up going to the bathroom, but then decided to step outside of the school just to get fresh air. Since he was on the front yard of the school, he decided to make a phone call to his girlfriend, who was in college at the time. As he was on the phone, he looked up to see that there was a strange man. He appeared to be wearing clothing that didn't look like he was a student. This was really strange, as he was pretty much just wandering around the place. Now, Eric got concerned, thinking that maybe this man was trespassing, or possibly maybe he was picking up his kid. Well, this man didn't seem to look happy, and he looked up at Eric. Eric immediately went back in the classroom. Of course, he took the other way so the other person wouldn't seem to follow him inside, and of course went up back to the classroom. The teacher asked why he was gone for a longer time, and Eric decided to play a lie, saying that somebody apparently called him and said that his grandma was sick. He knew it was a lie, but he couldn't really risk the fact of him telling him that someone was definitely out in the schoolyard. It wasn't until lunch period it wasn't until the bell rang and the class was over. Eric pulled his teacher aside and ended up explaining to him about what happened. Of course, he did get in trouble for leaving the school but of course it wasn't on school grounds that he left, but she did thank him for informing her. She eventually took him to the office, where they ended up reviewing the security footage of the strange guy wearing black clothes. They couldn't really find or identify the person, and of course the school went on temporary lockdown just to make sure that the guy was gone, and the police searched around the schoolyards just in case if there really was someone attempting to break in or cause a threat. Still to this day, Eric has no idea who this man or woman was, but she certainly didn't sound good. It still frightens him to this day of what this person could have done if they were smart enough to try and follow him. But since after that last day of school, he never came back. But he kind of wonders, what was this man's plans, or woman's plans even, and what they were gonna do to Eric? That still frightens him to this day, but it still leaves him questions in his head. Ever since he got out of school, he always wondered if the other students that are there now have to deal with that same man or not, but at least he wouldn't have to see that person anymore. This took place on the last day of school, and it happened to one of my friends back when she was in elementary school. I'll call her by the name Charlotte. Charlotte was about maybe 6 years old at the time of this story, and it was the last day of school. They didn't really do much in the elementary school except throwing parties. That was pretty much all what the school was doing. Charlotte asked this guy to go to the library at the time, since he wanted to get something, so an EA went with her to get a book. Of course, she was returning the book, but she wanted to read one in the library, so she did that. While she was reading the library, the school all of a sudden went on to lockdown. Of course, Charlotte ended up hiding in a place where she was away from windows, and that nobody would be able to get her. She waited for a little bit with her EA, honestly praying to God and hope it was just a drill. Suddenly, she can hear what seemed to be loud bangs coming from the outside of the halls of the school, followed by some screaming. She honestly couldn't really tell what they were or if this was a prank, but eventually it wasn't until she heard sounds of police sirens. Apparently, she ended up being called back out a little bit later by the cops, who said that they had caught a man. A man was deranged, and he apparently had mental issues. He wasn't on his meds for several days, so he ends up attacking the school and ended up trying to attack some students as well as kidnapping them. Charlotte honestly doesn't really remember too much from this, but it had to happen on the last day of school, where apparently that is when chaos had to break out. She wasn't sure what this man's intentions were, but since he was mentally unstable and mentally ill, his intentions were not good. A few years ago, I can't remember if it was 2017 or 2018, this actually happened to one of my friends. I'll call him by the name of Jackie for the sake of this story. Jackie was in high school, probably in junior year, and this was sometime in the last day of school, before exams were going on. Since he was exempted from most of his exams, he only had a period 4 exam, but that was just pretty much it. He pretty much was always on top of his classes, and most of the time he was in the lunchroom. Apparently before then, he started talking to this one girl who happened to be around the same age as him. They liked a lot of anime, and they even enjoyed having a few things in common. This girl, we'll call her Ashley. Ashley seemed to be pretty nice, and Jackie even started liking her. They even were chatting together at lunchtime and having good laughs. However, one of the times while at lunch, she even decided to exchange numbers. It was definitely fun while it lasted, until something really unfortunately happened. To be honest, Jackie wasn't expecting this, but one day when he was in school, it was at least a few days before the last day, Ashley wasn't even at the school. At first he thought maybe she was sick or maybe taking an appointment, but the people he went to, they honestly had no idea where Ashley was, and neither of them were in contact with Ashley or didn't talk to her much. Jackie honestly decided to shrug it off, and he decided to call her, but she didn't pick up. That was really strange, since there was no one on the phone, and Ashley would never leave her cell phone. It wasn't until the next day where he tried calling her again, this time a few times, but to no answer. It honestly was very shocking, knowing that there was no one on the phone. It was until the last day of school where Jackie had decided to leave the first period a little early to go to the office. When he went to the office, he explained to them about Ashley, a girl who happened to have not come to school for a couple of days, and he was getting concerned if something were to happen. It wasn't until at least around close to the end of lunchtime, where this is when Jackie was pretty much on his phone, scrolling through Facebook and even talking with a few of his friends. They were pretty much talking about what they're going to do for summer vacation, what their plans are, and etc. That's when Jackie was called in on announcements to the office, so Jackie packed his stuff and he went to the office. What the office told him was something really shocking. Apparently, Ashley was never a student in the class, and of course they had other Ashleys, but the Ashley he described her as was not anyone from her school. Apparently, she had been impersonating students and pretending to be a student just to get in. Eventually, one day, before the last day of school, they found this Ashley girl pretty much looking around, trying to find ways to break into the school. And what weapons they had with her was a knife. Apparently, she was arrested and she was sentenced to prison for 5 years. She apparently wasn't the age that Jackie's described her as. She was 18 years old, and apparently she used to go to the school, but she eventually wanted to come back just to impersonate others. Jackie had no idea what her intentions really were at the time, but even then though, she pretty much had his number, but it turns out that the parents, knew that Ashley had a lot of issues, and she eventually got students' numbers. It was later revealed that she had a history of harassing other students in classes as well as outside of school. It was still to this day that Jackie didn't even know why was Ashley targeting him, or why didn't we wanted to break into school. That was a question that Jackie would never know. It still haunts him to this day, knowing that this person was one day going to try and break into the school. She really had some serious issues, but Jackie even wondered, was she planning to rob him or something at school one day? That was all a mystery that Jackie will never forget. It still haunts him to this day, even after getting out of school, knowing that he was around while she was around. But he even wondered, what was Ashley planning to do with him? That was only his question in the back of his mind.